I had just wrapped up a short trip to Austin, visiting friends. Since I live in Louisiana, heading back was a full-day drive. Before leaving, I got a DM from my high school buddy Tom. He'd seen my story and asked when I was heading out. When I told him it was today, he said I should swing by. He lived just outside Austin, and it was on my route home. I hadn't seen him in years, so I figured why not. Tom's place had a vintage feel. Not decrepit, just preserved. His porch groaned with every step, and inside, the scent of aged wood made it feel like a forgotten cabin. We hugged it out and caught up like no time had passed. He poured whiskey, and soon hours had slipped away in warm, nostalgic conversation. Eventually, Tom offered me the spare bedroom. I was too buzzed to drive anyway. The room felt stale, like it hadn't been touched in ages. I collapsed into bed without even looking around. But in the middle of the night, I woke up with a dry mouth and a pounding head, and I saw something in the corner. At first, it seemed like a coat hanging on the closet door, but the longer I stared, the more it looked wrong. Like it had shoulders, like it was watching me. I convinced myself it was nothing and passed out again. When I woke up later, it was gone. I ran to Tom's room, shaken. He swore he didn't own a trench coat or have a coat rack. We searched the house. Nothing. Maybe it was the alcohol, maybe not. But something, or someone, had been in that room, watching me sleep. When I was 18, I took a road trip with my parents and my friend Anna to visit a theme park in Sweden. We brought tents, planning to camp, but we hadn't booked a spot. Every site was full thanks to a soccer tournament. Left without a place to stay, we found a small gravel lot deep in a forest near a remote beach. A hiker said it was a fine place to camp, so we pitched our tents. My parents took one, Anna and I shared the other. Nearby, an old car sat abandoned. I noticed it, but didn't think much of it, until night fell. Around midnight, while watching videos on our phones, we heard metal scrape against gravel, like a shovel. Then, a car trunk slammed shut and the car peeled away. Something about it made my skin crawl. I messaged a friend in a nearby city who warned me the beach had a sketchy history, crime, missing people. I felt sick reading it. And then came the scream. A man, somewhere in the woods, let out a blood-curdling cry. I texted my mom. No reply. I called. She answered groggy, confused, said she didn't hear anything. But Anno and I were frozen in terror. Footsteps followed. Someone walked around our tents, inspecting them. Then came headlights. The same car had returned. We ducked down. It didn't stay long, but minutes later, a police cruiser sped by in pursuit. We didn't sleep. At dawn, we packed up. My mom later admitted she heard footsteps and even breathing right outside their tent. When I researched the area, I found out someone had recently been murdered nearby, and 2 others still missing. I was 6 when this happened. My brother Keith and I shared a room upstairs, and bedtime was strictly enforced by our dad. That night, I woke to Keith gently shaking me. He whispered, "Listen." Downstairs, our mom was calling our names, only her voice sounded off. It was soft, too soft. Keith told me not to go, that something didn't feel right, but I was sure it was her. I pressed my ear to the stairway door and heard it clearer. "Keith." "Mikey." My heart jumped. That was Mom's voice. I slowly opened the door and looked down the stairs. Someone stood at the bottom. A woman, her shape barely visible in the dim light. But something inside me knew It wasn't Mom. She looked up and whispered, "Hi, sweetie. Come down." I slammed the door, locked it, and burst into tears. Keith and I screamed until our parents ran upstairs. Mom swore she hadn't called us. Dad searched the house. Later, we saw police outside. To this day, our parents never told us who that woman was, but I'll never forget her voice, how she knew our names, and how she waited for us in the dark. I was 16 when I went to a small get-together at my friend Haley's house. Things got awkward fast. She'd invited a guy I had history with, so I left early to walk home alone. It wasn't far, just a 20-minute walk through the neighborhood. 5 minutes in, I felt like someone was behind me. A man in a hoodie, hands in his pocket, was following. When I looked back, he smiled and said, "How you doing?" I kept walking, trying to stay calm. But every turn I made, he made too. Then he said, "Isn't it a nice night?" And finally, "You live near the elementary school, right?" That chilled me. I didn't respond. I ran. He chased me, and I screamed so loud the neighborhood lit up. He vanished into the dark as people came outside. A friend picked me up. But the fear didn't end. That night, as I sat inside, someone circled our house. A man's voice whispered outside my window, "I see you up there." We called the cops, who stayed nearby for hours. My mom later installed security cameras. A year later, she sold the house. We never found out who he was, but he knew my route, my name, and where I lived. That's enough to keep me looking over my shoulder. I live at the far edge of a quiet Utah town, where dirt roads lead to nothing but scattered trees and silence. After working from home, I drove into town like usual, grabbed groceries, nothing out of the ordinary. Except for him. I first noticed the man in the frozen foods aisle, standing oddly close, pretending to browse. When I moved to another aisle, he followed, just watching. I greeted him. No response. Just that vacant stare. Unsettled, I paid and left. It wasn't until I got home, parked under the fading sky, and began unloading groceries that I saw it. A dark, unlit truck parked in the field near my house, on my land. It hadn't been there when I arrived. No lights, no noise, just sitting in the dark. I watched it from my window for hours. No movement. I eventually convinced myself it was nothing. Some tired driver off the highway, maybe. But just after 2 a.m., I got up to use the bathroom and heard a sound downstairs. A soft creak. Not from the house settling. A footstep. There was a shape, moving near the back hallway. I didn't know if it was inside or casting a shadow from outside. Either way, I locked my bedroom and called the cops. More creaks, then silence. Then footsteps again, slow and deliberate. When the officers arrived, I heard someone bolt. They caught him sprinting across the field, back to the same dark truck. It was him. The man from the store, armed. He never stole a thing, never even looked for valuables. He wasn't there to rob me. He was there for me. I booked a last-minute cabin on the final leg of a solo road trip. 2 hours from my next destination, tucked behind a line of planted pines. It was quiet and strangely beautiful. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I pulled up at dusk. The place was nicer inside than I expected. Cozy, freshly renovated. 10 minutes in, someone knocked. I opened the door to a man, probably in his 40s, graying beard, work-worn skin, faint odor of earth and sweat. "Just wanted to make sure you got in okay," he smiled. The host. Or so he claimed. I thanked him, shut the door, and brushed it off. But not even an hour later, there was another knock. No text, no car, no warning. "Can you open the door? Just forgot to ask one more thing." I froze. I told him no. It was late. He didn't answer, just stood there. Until he didn't. When I looked through the door window, he was gone. But when I turned my head, he was staring back at me through the living room window. I ran, locked myself in the bedroom, and called 911. While I waited, he tried opening the window from the outside. Odd, since he supposedly had a key. The police arrived. He fled into the woods. And the real host? He was never there. He lived hours away. That man used the code. He lied. And I opened the door the first time. We took a spring trip to a remote cabin in Minnesota. Just me, my mom, and my little brother. We arrived around sunset. The place was old, quiet, and buried in forest. No neighbors, no cell service, no reason for anyone to be nearby. After they went to bed, I stayed up by the fire pit out back. The stillness of the forest was calming, until it wasn't. I heard something, a crack, like wood splitting. It sounded close. I stayed out a little longer, trying to convince myself it was nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. Back inside, I threw on a movie to distract myself. That's when I heard it, something moving outside. I leaned closer to the window, and the front door shook violently under a sudden bang. I jumped up. My mom came rushing out. I told her someone was at the door. She grabbed her phone and started dialing. I looked through the peephole. A man stood there, holding a large wooden axe. Just staring, no words, no movement, just silence and steel. Then he raised it. The blade cracked into the door with a heavy swing. We ran and barricaded ourselves in the back room. More strikes came, 3, 4, then nothing. When police finally arrived, the man was gone. Just vanished into the trees. But the axe marks in the door were still there. He never said a word, never asked for help. He didn't want anything. He just wanted in. It started with a sound of plastic cracking. I was microwaving leftover pasta at 2:13 a.m., half drunk and half awake, when I heard it. A sharp, wet pop, like someone stepping on a bag of frozen peas. I turned toward the fridge, and the freezer door was open. Not just ajar, wide open. Frost spilled over the edges like fog, and nestled inside was a pair of bare feet. Human feet. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. My apartment is on the 15th floor. There's only one door in, and I'd locked it myself. But I could see them. Pale, veiny, upright. As if someone was standing in the freezer. Only their feet were visible beyond the stacked ice trays and frozen pizza boxes. Then came the second noise, a slow clicking like teeth chattering, only deeper, wet. I slammed the freezer shut, locked the door, checked every room. Nothing, no one, even turned on all the lights, still nothing. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I convinced myself it was stress. Maybe I'd imagined it, a hallucination, a dream. I do freelance video editing. I pull too many all-nighters. But when I opened the freezer again to make coffee ice, the trays were all empty, dry, frozen solid, but bone dry. No water, no ice, as if something had drained them. That was the start of it. The real horror didn't come all at once. It crept in like mold. 2 nights later, I got a text from an unknown number. No message, just a video. I watched it. It was grainy, distorted, looked like security footage. A single frame of a freezer, not mine, but similar. Flickering light, fog swirling from the open door. Then, movement. A hand, thin, frostbitten, crawling out. The screen glitched, and in the last second, the frame froze on what looked like my apartment hallway. The front door. And right in front of it, a silhouette. Wide shoulders, a jaw that hung too low. The eyes were blurred, but I swear they were looking at the camera, like they were watching me watching them. I called the cops. They said the video had no metadata, no sender info, just an IP address from my own router. They didn't believe me, obviously, but I started hearing noises after that, at night. Scraping, behind the walls, in the vents. Sometimes under the bed, faint, slow breathing. Once, while I was recording narration for a client project, I caught something on playback. My voice said, "The following sequence requires attention to," and then another voice, whispering beneath mine, almost like it was inside my mouth, said, "Let me out." I never said that. I didn't. A week later, I woke up freezing. My bedroom window was open, even though I never open it. There was salt on the floor, a thin trail from the freezer to my bed. I checked the footage from my indoor camera. From midnight to 2:07 a.m., nothing. Then static. And at 2:08, it resumed. But the bed was empty. I was gone. At 2:13, the footage glitched again, and I was suddenly back in bed, lying in the exact same position. But when I zoomed in on the footage just before the cut, there was a figure standing in the freezer, watching the bed, watching me. I don't know how to explain what's happening. I found frostbite on my ankles last night. No wounds. Just raw skin, like they'd been soaked in ice water. There are scratches inside the freezer now. Long, vertical lines. And that same chattering sound, every night at 2:13 a.m., I started boarding it shut, but every morning, open again. And something's always missing. Milk, eggs, my toothbrush once. Like it's building something, or feeding. Last night, I had a dream. No, I was in the freezer. Standing upright, naked, cold biting into my spine. I couldn't move, but I could see. The door opened. A man looked in, terrified. It was me. The other me. Watching, screaming. I woke up with frost on my lips. I think I've been switching places with him. I think there's a version of me, one trapped in that space, that freezer. A reflection that's not quite right. It wants out. And I think last night it succeeded. Because this morning, when I looked in the bathroom mirror, my breath didn't fog the glass, but the reflection, his did.